So welcome everybody. Today, again, we will be covering how to review multiple trials. So we'll focus on three main features that we have in ARM to scan over and be as efficient as we can with looking over a bunch of trials at once. As opposed to maybe just looking at a single trial. We're trying to take an overview here, and there's a few features we can leverage in ARM. And the big three today we'll be covering is the study list, trial validation, and kind of with study rules that go hand in hand together, and then assessment column view options. All right. So first, the first feature to show is the study list in ARM. If you ever open up the ARM software without just double clicking on a trial, but you just launch it from your Windows Start menu, then you'll see the study list, that first screen that comes up. And really it is an indexed list of the trials and protocols that you have created or have opened in your ARM software on your computer. And the key thing to note about that is it's really just a view. It's just a glimpse of the studies that you're working on. It's not where the files are stored. It's not. Sorry, I had a question here. Nothing on the screen. Are you able to see my presentation? Let me stop sharing and I'll share again, see if that works. Hopefully you can see a PowerPoint. Okay. All right, hopefully you can see the PowerPoint here then. All right, thank you. Great. So the study list will work in just to note, it's not where trials are stored. You get to choose that. You can put your trials on your local hard drive. You can save them in a network spot so that way colleagues can access them as well, or a cloud drive like OneDrive or Dropbox, things like that, to kind of maximize the sharing capability and who can actually see those studies. So the study list really is just a way to look at and to filter and find the trials and protocols that are available to you on your computer. So that's kind of a key component just to consider when we look at that. I think just offhand, it's a little hard to know exactly, oh, there, I missed an icon there. Exactly what that study list does. But once we kind of understand it, I think we'll see a lot of capabilities that it offers, and especially in our topic today of looking at a group of studies and really being able to X-ray them, if you will, of being able to look across all of the trials that you have in that list. And I'll toggle over to ARM here in a moment, but just real quick before we show that, there are several components to the study list. I think sometimes that just is maybe a little overwhelming. There's so many boxes, so many different pieces of text there on the screen. So just to give a quick terminology on some of them, the bottom half here primarily is the study grid. It's the table. It really is the list of your trials and protocols. So it's got a bunch of different columns for the different information that is held within that file. There is a selected study panel just to make it a little easier to read that table. So whichever row that you're clicked into in the grid, over right to the right, there's a panel that just kind of shows the components in a little bit easier to read interface. A lot of times, for me at least, I just kind of scoot that over to the side and have it kind of pinned down because I usually just double click to open. PowerPoint is just not liking me today. All right. On top, the main portion in the top half is a section for filtering. That's really where we're gonna focus. That's one of the biggest powers to the study list, is the ability to, across all those different columns, those little bits of information in every field or in every trial, we have the ability to filter on those fields so we can, in our case, understand what information is in each of these trials that we want to review. It's also handy if you have your list for all 12 years of research that your company has done. You can use the study list to filter and find particular studies and experiments you've done based on certain criteria. But we'll focus on the reviewing capabilities today. And we'll also use some quick filters as we go through. That just also is another option for applying and searching our list of studies. And the navigation bar to the left just helps us find the different filters in the filter section. Okay, so that's enough theory here. Now let's go into ARM and kind of talk through our starting point for reviewing trials. So I have opened ARM, and again, I just opened it from my Windows Start menu, so that way I see the study list. If you do have a trial or a protocol open, you can get to this study list by just using the Close button, the little black X on the toolbar, or File Close. And that will close whatever trial you have open at the moment and bring you to this study list. And just in the interest of saving screen space, I'm going to trim down my navigation bar. So we're looking at the study list. So today I am showing the tutorial study list. Typically, you would see the list of your trials and protocols that you've worked on, but at the bottom there is a checkbox for tutorial. So there are a variety of trials and protocols that we include in the ARM installation. So if you were to want to follow along or kind of match what we've done today, you could in your ARM click on that tutorial box and you'll see the same list that I'm working on. Just gives us a good baseline here, I guess, of a bunch of studies that we can play around with and demonstrate, and hopefully be repeatable if you want to practice this later. So as we said, this main grid in the middle here are all of the trials and protocols that I have worked on or that I have created. And what we can do in this, I guess this idea here for today's topic of reviewing a set of trials, I think the first step we would want to do is focus our study list on just the trials that we want to review. So there's a couple of methods for that. One thing we could do is create a filter. So at the top here, we have many different fields that would allow us to filter down this list. So if I wanted to, in today's example, I'm going to focus on the trials that we have that we use in our ST, our Summary Across Trial introductory examples. So all of them have a study ID that starts with ST-exam. And then I put a little asterisk after that and before it. So any trial ID or protocol ID that contains this text is going to be what is shown in this list, and everything else will go away. So when I hit enter here, that's exactly what happens. You'll see this list has now changed. We filtered down, and I can see a summary at the top that my active filter has shrunk. I'm only viewing 7 out of the 66 trials and protocols that I had to begin with. And I use study ID. Depending on how you build your IDs, that might be very easy. If all trials in a particular series that you want to look with have a particular pattern to them, that works very well to do so. But you do have any of these other fields available to you. You know, we could have searched in the trial year, and this little gold box allows us to choose just particular values that are found. In my case, you can see all of these trials are from 2014. So there's really only the one option. If I were to clear out that filter, so we had this full list, then you would see that I can use this gold box and really narrow down to just this year per se. We'll just pretend we're living in 2014 as all of our example files are getting kind of old. And you'll see now with just 2014, we're down to 30 out of the 66. We haven't quite narrowed down as far as maybe I want to, so we could continue to filter to find the ones we want. So I could do that ST exam to get back to where we'd want to be. I do have a protocol in here, whereas the rest of the trials are all listed. So I could filter over here in the quick filter. I can turn on just trials. So that might be helpful as well. So we can focus on the set of 6 trials. So that's kind of one method to start. You know, we really want to set up this study list. So we're looking at the specific trials that we're wanting to review. Just to show the other method that can be useful for this, I'm going to first turn off my tutorial just to go to my regular study list, and I'll clear out my filter. There is a rebuild button, either in the lower corner of the study list or under utilities. You can also rebuild your study list. And so what this will do is have ARM go out to a particular folder on your computer and load in any trials and protocols that are in that one location. So the idea here is if I have all of the trials I've received for a particular project, I put them all in one folder, then I can point ARM to that folder and clear out my list. So that way I only see trials and protocols that are in that one folder. And this will drop out anything I had in my list and only view those particular ones. Here, this is looking at whatever trials we used in last month's webinars. So I think it'll be safe. We should pull in a couple of trials. So it just drops out that list that I had before, start with an empty list, and then find any of the trials. And there it found 4 of them. And then ARM just loads each of those into my study list. So this would be another method to focus in. We've shown ARM only the particular trials that we care about, that we want to review today. Again, that was with the rebuild. Or what I'll do for today's example, I'm going to switch back to the tutorial and just create that filter one more time of the ST examples and trials. So now we have our list of trials. And the advantage here, the reason we're using the study list, is we can look at this table and we can really see a lot of information about all 6 of these trials all at once. And that's really the advantage here. Instead of opening up trial number 1 and clicking through every tab in the trial to review and see if anything's missing, things like that, why not do that process once with a table here to see all 6 of them at one time? So we can scroll through and just continue scrolling to the right if we want and really just looking down each column and seeing, are we missing something that matters to us? Does something look unusual? See, I've got a lot of European countries here, that different locations of this trial. Everyone recorded GPS coordinates. That is important to us. Initiation date, completion date, awesome. So, everything is looking good. And so we can just kind of continue to scroll through each of these columns here to find information that's missing or maybe surprising. In this case, the same crop code is entered, so that's good. No one changed the crop on us or entered the wrong code there. It's very consistent there. Things like that. We have planting date. Oh, but we are missing, some of these trials don't have a crop stage majority. If that was important to us, then that's good to note. I could jot down example 1, 3, and 4 all did not fill in the crop stage majority. So this is a good way to get an overview of the trials. Now, it probably doesn't quite cover everything. Most of the kind of one field pieces of information, it works really great. A lot of the site description information is like that. So it gives us a good overview. Things like applications are a little harder. When there are more than one application in a particular trial, it's a little hard to see that information in a table view. So there are going to be some things that we can't quite capture and review super well in this view, but we get a good portion of them. So applications, that's one where we may have several different applications. We're not going to get a great look at each and every one of those. Kind of the same thing with assessments as well. It's just going to be hard for us to get a glimpse of those, and so we'll kind of tackle those in our other our upcoming features here that we're covering. But we can at least get an overview of how many applications. So there were 2 applications for all of those, the treatments, assessment columns. So we can at least start to get an idea of whether we're missing something or not. So a couple of these trials have a few more columns than the other ones. And maybe if we had the protocol, we would know how many assessment columns we're expecting. So maybe the trialist just added a couple extra calculations, or maybe we are expecting more and these 11s are actually too few and we're concerned. Or maybe some of the assessment columns with data don't match the assessment columns. That would tell us they haven't filled in all of the data that we had planned for them to fill in. So a lot we can see here, and the key is to use the study list to really iterate and get a table real quickly for this. So we're getting a consistency check across whatever trials we care about. And we're just using the filter or rebuilding our list to zero in on the trials we want to review. Couple other functions as you look at, this table is very big, and maybe scanning can be a little tedious. There are a couple things we can do here on the screen to kind of help us with that. Let me go to the very far left here. As an example, you can move the columns. So we can change the order and we can hide some of these columns as well, just like we do in a trial file itself. So if let's just say we never use other trial ID, there's really no reason I would want to see it. I can right click on that column and hide that field. So just like we do in a trial, it's not going to delete the information that's in there if there was something in there. It's just going to remove that project ID. Well, I never work with project IDs, or I don't need to review that because that's always filled in the protocol, whatever. I can hide that field and it just takes it away from the view so I can focus on the columns that matter to me. I can also change the order of the column. So if I click my mouse on a heading and then drag over, and then when I let go, it moves the column. So if I want to prioritize what columns I see in what order, maybe this title is always really long, and so maybe that can go farther over. I want trial year more towards the front. I can click and drag to order these however I would like on the screen. So that can help, again, just to prioritize, group things the way you might want to see them, and make this view yours, that study list, to see how you want to look things in what order. The other advantage, customizing this table, is the fact that we can actually export this table the exact way that we see it at the moment. We can export out, and maybe we want to bring it into Excel, for example. So there's a clipboard at the bottom of the study list. There's actually a little drop down. There's kind of two different ways we can copy this information: copy all or copy map info. So copy map info only copies like your latitude and longitude coordinates and the trial ID, so that way you could map it out. You could take it to some mapping software, mapping tool, and put all the coordinates on a map, which looks pretty cool. But for today's example, the copy all is going to be what we want to do. And so, like I said, this is going to copy this entire table, all of the rows filtered the way we have defined the filter, and however we've ordered these columns. So then if I go into Excel, then I can paste that information. So now I've exported all that information, hidden or not, moved around, whatever. All of this information is now in Excel. So you can about imagine the usefulness of that if you needed to provide a summary to somebody of what trials are going on or the progress of them. You can get all this information and then just delete out whatever you might not need. Another handy thing I think that would be useful for our reviewing trials example is you can highlight blank cells. So a way to maybe automate a little bit that manual reviewing of every column to see if something is missing, we can do that in Excel. If we go under the home page here, then there should be a conditional formatting. Where's my, or is it under data? We had a conditional formatting. There we go, here under styles. So under conditional formatting, and I've highlighted the rows that I wanted to color, then we create a new rule. And all we have to do is format only cells that contain, and specifically we want to say blanks. So I'm going to decide what do I want to do to any cell that is blank. And I just click on this format. The simplest thing is maybe we'll just fill it in yellow. That's a nice, easy way to take a look. And when I click OK, Excel then is going to highlight any cell in what we've selected to be yellow. So things like this, where one of them wasn't filled in with the rest, maybe this is a little easier to spot. There's that crop stage majority. So just depending on your workflow, what might work best, this might have some functionality to help spot and review and find out what we're missing. Again, hopefully a lot faster. The more trials you have, really the more efficiency you gain, because the process here was the same, whether we had 6 trials or 60 trials that we had to look at. It'd be the exact same process. We would just have more items in this table. So that's the study list. So moving to the next step here, so our example, we can find that crop stage, let's say. So now we found an issue. We've used the study list to kind of uncover an inconsistency or something that's missing. Well, we're in the study list, so I simply can double click on this trial to open it up. So we have kind of identified a particular field. In this case, it was our crop stage. It was that crop stage at application that wasn't filled in. So we could certainly kind of fix that, maybe go back to our study list and look at the next field or maybe the next trial that also was missing that field, and so on and so forth. Still a little bit manual. So our next functionality, our next feature to cover is really trying to maybe automate our manual scanning within one particular trial. And so that is the trial validation. And so this tool will have ARM kind of scan over a trial and perform a few steps for us. It refreshes any automatically calculated information in the trial. Then it performs cross checks of certain information. So something like a unit and a value, that pair, if I put in a number but I forgot the unit, obviously that the unit needs to get filled in. Or vice versa. If I put in a unit but I never recorded the number, then that's just a logical thing ARM can find to say, hey, that should get filled in. I'm assuming you meant to put in the number since you put in a unit. And can do some cross-checking on dates as well for a consistency check. And then finally, it will verify any rules that are in that trial. Depending on the study, there may be the study definition rules, or if you're using a customization, they've got their own set of rules that get applied. Or there's user-defined rules, which we call study rules. So if I go back to my ARM, running this validation is just a matter of, under the Tools menu, we can validate the trial. And that, you saw, it took a second. There was some red text in the corner. Kind of goes pretty quick. And ARM did all of those things. It refreshed any of those calculations and then checked to see if there was any issues. And what we see is just one warning. So it's not an error. If it's a red X, that means there's an error that the trial is not valid. This is just kind of an FYI, just some information for us. A warning that crop 1 was never used. There was nothing entered in the crop staged application or the assessment data. Well, that's a little bit of a concern for us. That does tell us something. We kind of already knew there was nothing in the crop stage. It's also maybe a little weird that it was never used in the assessment data either, but depends on our assessments. If we're really focused in on our pest, then maybe we never really did assess the crop itself. But besides that, nothing else really popped up as a problem. And that's because the list of things ARM checks by default is a little bit shallow. ARM really is designed for all sorts of different research, and as such, we really can't be too picky about the validation that comes in ARM by default. Because we don't know what type of research you're doing. We don't know what matters to you versus what might matter to someone else doing a different type of research. So there's not a whole lot that's baked into the validation by default. but you can make this validation process your own. You can really customize this validation to match your research by using study rules. So we've got a whole section. It's here in the navigation bar near the bottom, a whole editor for study rules. And so you can create rules to really customize that validation and automate the process of checking over all the different sections of a trial. Really, we can make that much more efficient by doing that process once. Let's walk through a trial, clicking on each section and finding the pieces of information that we need. And we can create a rule for every single one of those pieces of information. And then let's do that once and only once. And we can save all those rules we've defined and use them in every single trial from then on. And that's a way we can really gain a lot of efficiency and really just automate that process of looking at each trial by hand. So that's really what study rules offers us, is a customized validation and a way to review a trial in a matter of seconds instead of having to manually open every trial and manually click through every section, scanning over those components and things we care about. So that's really the workflow that I just described, is to do that manual process once of looking at every section and deciding, what do I care about? What do I need for this type of trial? And we'll make a study rule with every one of those. And then we can save that list of rules that we create. We'll save that to a file so that way every other trial, it's super fast. All we do is load in, we just put that list of rules into the next trial and then validate. And ARM will tell us what we're missing, and then we can go and fix it. And then open the next trial, validate, fix those things. And save all of that scanning. And we only really scan once. And then there's a question. The great point about creating that list of rules is you can use it again and again. Other researchers can use that list as well. So we'll see when we save that list of rules, it's just a file that is on your computer. You can take that file and send it to somebody else. Or we could even save that rule file to a network or some other shared spot, so that way the other researchers in our company can also use that list. So not only are we going to make ourselves more efficient, we can make our whole group, all of our colleagues, more efficient as well. So great question, and really an advantage here to this process is we don't even have to just make ourselves more efficient. We can implement this across everybody. So real quick, next week we will be covering study rules more in depth. So we're going to try to do this fairly quick, but feel free to join us next week for an even deeper look at the study rules. But the basic process here, like I said, let's just click through every section of a trial and look at the screen and say, when I'm scanning to see if I have everything I need from my cooperator, if everything I need in this trial, instead of just looking and saying yes or no, let's create a rule. So for example, discipline. That thing, I always want to filter on that. That works really good for us to be able to categorize our trials. So I need that filled in. So I'm just right-clicking on whichever piece of information I want. And at the bottom of my right click is the commands related to the study rules. So I want to require that discipline is filled in. And I can choose for that to be required always. So from the very moment a trial is created, that should get filled in. Or I could choose a particular trial status. So there's a timing layer to this. I'm going to just be really simple and just require everything always. So discipline matters. I always need the country. you'll notice that I might be choosing things that are already filled in. And that's fine, because remember, we're creating the list of things we care about, so that way we can do the same checking in every trial. So I've identified the country, the GPS coordinates I need. Maybe the GPS accuracy is something I'm interested in, but I don't have to have it. There is a second study rule type, which is recommended. So instead of an error, this will just give us a warning, the little yellow exclamation point to say, if this isn't filled in, we don't absolutely have to have it. I'm just recommending that you fill it in. And so I could go through each and every section to say, what do I need? What do I not need? Maybe we'll go into that crop stage at application just because we've seen that one as something we need. This one I can require it with an application date, so that way it doesn't flare up only until the application is actually applied. So we can go through all of the site description. We could do this for our header, the treatments, the assessment data, all of the different sections where information's filled in. We can create study rules. I'll keep it brief here today, but you can see for all of those right-click actions I performed, we've created a study rule here in this list. So what we can do, oh, I've got a question here quick before we show. So we're relying on the trial manager to update that trial status. And so that, it is true that that trial status is a lot of what that condition can be based on. So the trial status, which was on the general trial, this does get updated automatically a couple of times, but not all the time. So I think when you create the trial, it starts as setup. As soon as you put in any sort of date, it goes from setup to established. But I'm not sure that ARM can do much else as far as moving it into interim or final. I think it will offer, if someone types in the completion date, then I think it'll offer to mark it as final. I'm not sure if it does it automatically. So there is a little bit, it is good to note that as you're creating these rules, to make sure that there's an SOP on making sure that trial status is where it should be. A great point. Like I said, we can dive into more specifics as well next week too, as we play with these rules a little more. But I've got this list of rules, and actually just to show the reason we're doing this, now if I perform a validation, it pops up. I don't get all the way through the process, and it pops up to tell me, wait a minute, there's study rule number 1 says I need to fill in discipline, but it's empty in this trial. And ARM actually takes me right to the spot where discipline is not filled in to say, hey, this needs to be filled in. Another possibility, instead of validating the trial, there's a validate trial and log errors. This will go through the entire validation process and give me a list, a nice overview of things that are missing. So this can be useful if you aren't particularly the one that would need to update this. Maybe I'm the sponsor receiving trials back. I need to have my trialist fix these validation problems. The advantage of log errors is now I get this list of all the things that I usually check with my own eyes. Instead, I had ARM do it in a second. And I've been given this list, and now I can click into a clipboard button, and this will copy this list, which I could drop in an email. I'm just going to bring up Word here and just to show that I can paste in that list. I send an email back to my trialist to say, I'm missing these information from the trial. Can you please update your trial and send it back with this information? So again, we're automating this manual clicking through everything and doing it all in one moment and having ARM do it fast. So that worked great for this trial. Now that question is, how can I do this again in the next trial without having to right click and add everything that I want to check? I'm going to save a set here in the study rules. So this is going to save this list that I've created into a file that I can use again and again. By default, it puts it in my GDM def folder on my computer. This is where ARM looks the first time. You could save it to a network location, or you could find this file and email it to colleagues, and they can put it on their computers so their ARM can use this as well. So I'm going to name it something that tells me, why should I use this? And so I'm going to say, well, this is the list I created when I'm ready to do my trial review for this year. And we've got a longer description that we can save to the file if we need. Now, the advantage here is, let's say I fixed this trial or I sent off that email, so that way my trial list can fix it. I can close this trial, come back to my study list. And if we recall, we were in the crop section, and was there just the one that didn't have the crop stage? No, we also had number 3. So maybe I want to move to number 3, and I can open that trial. And again, instead of manually looking at everything, I can come to the study rules editor, and I can load that set. So here's all the study rules I've created, and here's that trial review 2023. And here's where that description that I typed in that second question, I can see that description to tell me a little more, to make sure I'm picking the right one. So I'm going to load in this rule set. And now I have that list of everything I care about in this trial. Tools, validate, and log errors. I've got my list. I can do my clipboard and create a new email to whoever needs to see that, paste in my error, and send that on. Tell my trial list I need that information. Or if I am the trialist, if I can make those changes, I can just use the regular validation and have ARM step me through and fix each problem. So maybe this is, I don't know if it's a fungicide or what it is exactly, but there's my discipline. I can continue, I can just validate again. I can use the toolbar button as well, same thing, and it'll just continue on and bring me through each piece of information that I need to fill in. And obviously I'm just entering junk. There, and I made it through all of the errors. So now I just have warnings to say, well, it's recommended that I fill in the GPS coordinates, but I don't have to. I'm not sure if that information is in Spanish or not. I guess you'd have to try if your study definition, if you've changed your ARM to Spanish. I'm not sure. I think that text should be translated as well, but let us know if it's not. We could look to see if that is something we should be translating for you or not. All of those errors and such. All right, so that covers the second component, the second tool we have. And again, hopefully, we talked through it, so it took a long time. But hopefully you can see with this second trial just how fast things go. It takes a little bit of work the first time around to set up that list of rules. And then every single trial after that will go a lot faster, because it's just load the set, hit validate, and off you go. open the next trial, load the set, etc. Now the last, certainly not the least, function we can talk about is on the assessment section. And actually, let me clear out, give a little preview of what we're going to end up doing here. The assessment editor, I'm going to pin down the properties just for a moment to have a look at all of our data columns. Since we've got multiple assessment columns, it's a little hard to review in the study list to see what information's filled in and what's not per trial, because we've got so many columns in each and every trial. So might be kind of for each trial, we'd want to open up and look at the assessments that we filled in. And depending on how many assessments we took, this is a pretty small one. 11 is remarkably small, probably for a real trial. It's not too hard to end up with dozens of columns of information. So what we can do is utilize some view options to make it easier to look at what we have in this trial. And if we're missing something important in this trial, which we can then repeat for each and every trial that we're looking at. Real quick, it's a pretty noticeable change within the last year in ARM, but we can shrink down some of these sections in the editor. So especially if you're on a slightly small monitor like I have here for sharing, instead of having all of these rows of information visible, if you shrink down either with the plus or really clicking anywhere in that title heading, will shrink down that group. And you'll notice for something like pest, we've identified one field in that group that is kind of the main one. So when you shrink down, you can still see that one most important information. So you can still see the crop code and the pest code without all of those different rows visible, making it a little easier to see information just as we're trying to get an overview of what we're looking at. So over on the properties panel, and if it's not visible by default, you'll want to click on the properties and pin it down so we can have it on our screen. There's a shortcut to the view options. This is going to allow us to customize what we're looking at on the screen. Try and make it a little more efficient to quickly get an overview of what we're looking at, what we have in this trial. So there's a column filter section at this top, and that's really what we're going to use today. So in this table is every row in the assessment header. And what we can do is mark it as visible or not. My screen, I don't have the little box. There should be a little checkbox, but for whatever reason, when I'm sharing in Zoom, sometimes those things disappear. But we can choose whether the row is visible or not, just like any other field in ARM. But what we have kind of special to the assessment editor is the ability to match or sort which columns we see on the screen. So for example, maybe I want to use the rating type. That's kind of the general, what did I do? If I want to sort by rating type, I would put a number 1 in the rating type row for this sort column. Then if I have the same rating performed at, maybe there's different pests. I could go find the pest code, and maybe I'll want to sort within the same rating type. I maybe want to sort by pest code. So I would put a number 2 into pest code to be the second layer of sorting. There's also an option to display the sort as tabs. So whatever row I've chosen to be the number 1 sort we're going to see them as tabs, almost as if you were in Excel, grouping them together instead of having everything on the screen all at once. So when I click OK, you'll see the order has changed, 1, 2, 3, 5. We're not looking at all of the columns anymore. We have about half of them at the moment. And that's because we're only looking at the columns of control. And then you can see that the pest is our second sorting. And maybe I'll expand this just to see. We've sorted by pest code, so they're not necessarily in the original order. 1, 2, 3, 5. And then we have 4 and 6, just because it's sorting based on the pest code in alphabetical order. The nice thing is with that display sort as tabs, we now can click and we only see columns that have that particular rating type. So there's only one moisture rating, one test weight. And yield, we ended up having 3 different ones as we did different yield conversions. So by applying a sort and then using that sort as tabs, we can kind of filter and view only a particular assessment type to make it easier to really sort through and look at the assessments that were performed. It's also a consistency check. So if for some reason one of these assessments, maybe the person typed in control, they weren't using an SE, they didn't do the same approach, then when I refresh my view, you'll see we have the control, and there's also the rating type that doesn't quite match as a separate tab. So by applying the sort with tabs, then we can see pretty quickly if there's some inconsistency. Wait a minute, there's 2 different tabs of control. Oh, they didn't put the same rating type. And the question, you can make this the way that ARM prints the columns as well. So if we're in the print reports, whether you're doing the AOV or the assessment summary, kind of whatever report you're generating, you'll find in general summary, there's the option for assessment data columns, and you would turn on current view. So that will match the view that we look at right now, which we've applied this sort. And then there is a sub option if you want to paginate to keep together each sort section. So knowing that we've sorted things into different groups, ARM can make sure that we paginate so we don't split up a group that if they would all fit on their own page, basically. So those view options, we can come back and forth. We can open that view options and tweak, change to different sort, whatever we might want to do. There's also this visible column button, which tells us, by the way, that we are looking at only 5 out of the total of 11 columns that we see on the screen. If you click it, it actually will pop up right on this screen, those controls that change the view. So this can be kind of a quick dynamic way to tweak what we're looking at. Maybe in my case for the reviewing, maybe I don't care so much about the pest code. I don't really need to sort by that. But maybe if I sort by the rating unit, I could find any inconsistencies with the rating type and rating unit. And in our case, I can look at control, then the rating units would all be in a row. So maybe if the second one, for some reason, somebody typed % in, then once we refresh that view, I can see %, everything looks good. And then on the end, wait a minute, this rating unit isn't the same as the others. So depending on what you care about, what you want to look at, this can be a great way to scan for consistency or get a nice overview of what is in this trial, what assessments were taken, and really organize. And again, by any field that we want. So I did the rating type, but I could clear, and maybe we care more about the pest. Maybe I want to know all the different assessments, the different pests, what did we assess on the different pests? So maybe that's what I care the most about, and I'm going to sort by pest code. There I can see what was done with Cheel, what was done with Marianne, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, if there are some that are blank, then we just see the rest of them together. So a lot of functionality here. The trick, at least for me, trying to show good examples is tricky because it depends on the research that you're doing. But any field that you would care about, excuse me, you can turn on a sort and have them as separate tabs and view that. One more trick here that I think goes unnoticed, at least I usually almost forget about it, so I made sure I didn't want to forget about it here today, is there are a couple of, I guess they'd be filters really, for the columns. And so this entry status typically is set to both. So we see all columns, but we can view only ones that contain data or only columns that are empty. So let me turn that off, set this to both, just so we get back to where we usually are, where there's just columns 1 through 11. They're all in the same order. I'm going to cheat the system and just clear out to see that, well, maybe there's one assessment that hasn't been performed just yet. But maybe we don't know that. If we go and set that entry status to empty, to say, are there any columns here that are empty, that haven't been filled in? Boom, we only see the one column that hasn't been filled in yet. And we've hidden all 10 that do have data. So it might be handy to find a column that hasn't been filled in, or if we're in the middle of the year, you could use this as a way to only view ones that have data. So I can just filter out anything that hasn't been done yet, because we're still mid-season. There probably are some that aren't. I only want to look at the ones that have data to do whatever I want to do with it. So that was in the visible columns there, the entry status filter as well. All right, well, we've filled up our time here. Hopefully we've learned some efficiencies on our reviewing of the trial. If you do have any questions or ideas for how you can improve that process, feel free to send us an email. Thank you all for your time and your questions. I do see I have one question here to reiterate. Here on this, when you're loading the study rules, when we clicked on the load set, it's down here at the bottom of the screen. When you click on a particular rule, then you can see that text that I typed in. So today's example, we did the trial review, and I had typed in that longer description, trial review process. So it's on the load screen that you can see what it was I typed in that longer message.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Hopefully we'll be seeing you at another webinar soon.